presentations. I'm sorry. Forgive me. We're gonna do like a panel up here, but you guys can y'all just keep talking. It's fine. No, hi. My name is John Golson, and welcome to the penultimate hour of Fan Expo. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here all day long, right? So on this panel today, we have James Tynion IV, joined by some of his collaborators, Fernando Blanco and Marty Simmonds as well, to talk about some of their work that, quite frankly, scares me. It's like, I get that it's horror tinged. I get that it's like it's horror. Some of it is outright horror.
Yeah.
Some of it is just stuff that I don't want to look at. I don't want to think about. Which
That's
is
my favorite stuff.
This web of conspiracies. What's funny to me too is that Tynion, my introduction, I think a lot of people's introduction to you was sort of through Talon, which is also a book born of secret societies and like hidden clandestine societies and things like that, which has definitely been a through line.
Absolutely.
Through some of your work. Let's get into this a little bit. James, how paranoid are you?
I mean, I think it's more there, especially when it comes to comic book storytelling and all that. The idea of the big secretive organization is just a very satisfying, like, fictional concept. And then on top of that, beyond just being into, obviously with Department of Truth, I've always been fascinated with the lore around conspiracy theories. But beyond that, I'm also like a huge fan of early 2000s era Wildstorm comics, and which is all here's 5 layers of secret societies all fighting each other, which I love. That is like my favorite type of thing. And then half of superhero comics is just different layers of secretive organizations that are managing the superheroes and fighting the superheroes. And, I've always loved that stuff. I've always loved a good conspiracy thriller. I find those stories really satisfying to write and to read, and I'm probably going to keep writing them.
And how did you, if you don't mind, kind of origin stories with your collaborators here? How did you meet Fernando? How did you meet? I'll actually ask them. Fernando, how did you meet James? Marty, how did you meet James?
Well, we started working together at the and Simmonds Fernando.
Yeah.
And we have from time to time a few more small collaborations, but he must see something in my book that one day we changes some emails about nothing. About readings and stuff like that, and he proposed me to work together in a free room.
Yeah.
Basically, this stuff.
No, I've always been, especially working in superhero comics, I always notice very quickly when an artist really clicked with my style of scripting. And one thing that I've noticed over and over and over again is that it's a lot of European artists who really click with my storytelling. I think a big part of that is there's a whole generation of American comic artists, especially ones that are much more steeped in the superhero tradition, who only really grew up with superhero comics. And so superhero comics is how they learn the visual language of storytelling. But I came up with an age where I was reading almost equal manga and American comics at the exact same time, and some European comics a little bit. I was and web comics and all that. I was I love the comic form, and I've never really discriminated between which corner of it that I enjoy reading. And so I always noticed that, because I always wrote like someone whose whose influences are hybrid of the two. And manga picked up in Europe I would say 5-10 years earlier than it became as popular over here. And therefore it's just the Like there's a whole generation of artists that were equally influenced by both superhero comics and manga and all of that. And so I always noticed like who are the ones who's like bringing page compositions that make sense in the way that I try to write my pages. And I always lean towards the style that I'm working in and all that, but it's just like I noticed very early on, even though like Fernando and I never had like a long run of anything at DC, we just had little issues here and there, but I just connected to something, like even just the layout stages, where it was just like, okay, this is like capturing the feeling that I was putting down on the page, and it's delivering it like how I wanted it delivered, and then excelling past that point. So Fernando was always on the list. It was just like, you know what, like I want to do something more substantial with him down the road, and then we started emailing and just throwing ideas back and forth. And I had this idea for World Tree percolating in the back of my mind for years, and then one day I just like threw the whole big concept at him, and it's just like, you know, the rest is history.
Yeah, so me and James, well, James got in touch with me out of the blue, really, to be honest with you. It turns out it was a recommendation from Matthew Rosenberg.
Yeah.
So I was working on a book called Plants Not Dead, which was, I was working completely digitally, and coming in contact with me is actually because you saw a sketchbook that I created, with a completely different style to what I was working on at the time. So really, when the introduction to James it caused a shift in my style actually into something completely different. But you said, yeah, that's the style I want to use in the book, and so yeah, we talked for a while, yeah, before we actually kind of got into actually working on it.
Because you had like a whole mini, like you were still finishing Frendo, I think.
Frendo,
and then there was like another book, and so it's just like, and then I was busy with a bunch of DC stuff at the time, so it's like every time Mark was like, oh, I have to do a few more issues, I was like, okay, good. Like, I can only write 100 books a month. But you know, it was something that, once again, it was like what I connected with, like for Department of Truth in particular, I had the core concept, I had a more robust outline than frankly I usually do for a core concept, even though it's changed significantly. But I knew I wanted like this like scritchy feel to it. The idea of like a comic that almost felt like a photocopy of a photocopy, like something that's like you know, a paranoid zine made in a like back corner shop. Like that was the kind of vibe I wanted, but you know, like obviously I wasn't gonna get like Bill Sienkiewicz to like do like, especially at that point in my career, it's just like I might be able to get him for a cover every now and then, like that's about it. But it was just like there weren't a lot of people working in that mixed media style that had that texture. But then and I was bemoaning that fact to Rosenberg, and I had known like Martin's work a lot, but the digital work, like I would liken it more to like a style like almost like kind of in the arena of Phil Noto a little bit. Yeah, like and but then when I saw these scritchy illustrations of it was different musicians, and they were like just these beautiful, beautiful drawings, and they were all ink, and you could feel the ink. And it was just like, it was like messy and weird and cool. And I was just, and I remember my email was like very apologetic, where it was just like, I have no idea if this is like a style that you have no interest in doing, or this was just a fun little experiment, especially because I'm asking you to do a book that you're gonna have to be working on for a few years. So it's just like, if you're interested in this, I am asking you to do a thing you don't currently do, and I'm asking you to do it for years, which might like change the whole trajectory of your art style. So if you're not interested, that's fine. Like I will take no offense. But then thankfully you're like, no, I wanted to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the right project to shift style into that work. But interestingly, that was the time when I shifted to analog work rather than digital as well. So it was a massive shift for me. But yeah, it was the right project at the right time, really. Eternally grateful.
So the trivia question for the audience, you know what the first two words are in Department of Truth? Anybody know? Very first words. We're from Dallas, Texas.
There we go. Yes, they are. So actually, funnily enough, with the Dallas, Texas of it all, last time I was here at Dallas Fan Expo, it It was for the 2019 show. I forget exactly when in the year it was, but I think it was earlier than it is. I think it was more like May or April even. But I was here and I came a day early because I was in the middle of developing this book, and I went to, I did Dealey Plaza, I did the Book Depository Museum, and after that I went up to the restaurant, the rotating restaurant on Reunion Tower that overlooks Dealey Plaza as it sort of slowly rotates around, and I had my laptop with me, and I actually wrote the first like 5 to 10 pages, the entire opening sequence with Lee Harvey Oswald, in like right there in the restaurant, and then it was like back and forth for a couple more months before the full issue was done. But it was born out of the first issue started. I wrote that Dallas, Texas, while in Dallas, Texas.
Are conspiracy theories a more uniquely American experience? Or are there conspiracy theories that Americans have no idea exist in other major parts of the world?
Absolutely. I think they're a fairly universal human thing, and I mean there are conspiracies that go back hundreds and hundreds of years, and I think a lot of the tension in Europe in the early 20th century, was a lot. There were a lot of conspiracy theories flying around right then, and but there is something unique about America. America is more so than almost any other country in the world a kind of fictional concept. The reason America is because we all agree it's America. And it is something where, we only have a few hundred years of history. It's not like, France is France because there was a tribe of Franks that lived there thousands of years ago. We were just a branch of the Germanic tribes, north of Rome. And it's just that is true of all of Europe and everywhere else in the world, but it's just no, this was a colonized country. This is we have built our culture, we have built our mythology around it, and we are more susceptible to stories about ourselves and stories that we tell about ourselves. And therefore we're kind of weaker to conspiracy theories because it's, we're always telling a story of America. So if something suddenly doesn't click with the story that an individual is telling about America, then they start focusing on the other stories that then support who is preventing their story of America from coming true. So we grasp on to conspiracy theories, I think, a little faster in the modern world than some other countries, but it's not by no means a unique American trait. Yeah.
Is there this is a little bit fanboyish. I don't know if you can even say it is completely within the realm of possibility, at least from what I've read of the books. Is there any connection between the world of World Tree and the world of Department of Truth? Is that something you can even answer?
I mean, no. And you'll see as World Tree moves forward, World Tree is a science fiction book that will become you will see the science fiction-y elements of it assert themselves in much more direct text.
There was nothing that contradicted so far.
Yeah, no, and I mean, everything, all these stories, I think it is unlikely that, I'm going to lean into crossovers between my titles, and if we did, we would do it in a kind of, fun little bubble that wouldn't affect the core continuity of any of the work. Honestly, I think ideologically, tonally, I think DOT and World Tree are very connected, World Tree is also, I think, very tonally close to Nice House on the Lake. But it's just I think DOT is in terms of the central driving ideology, it's closer to the mythology of Something is Killing the Children actually, because Something is Killing Children is people's fear manifesting into these monsters that children can see because they believe in monsters that adults can't see. So it matches more closely to the idea of a subjective reality, that the world changes based on what you believe.
I want to make sure that I open the questions up to the audience as well. You have a question, Dave?
I do.
Yeah.
Big fan of all three of you and Calvin Rose.
Thank you.
I love him and I miss him so much. I wanted to ask, what are some of your influences? I hope to hear Jinjito at some point from one of you three. But what are some of your influences when it comes to your artwork or the writing that you're doing, like some of the stories that you're telling?
I've been talking about you guys. You guys go first. Art-wise, influences would most definitely be some of the vertigo and the epic artists from the late 80s and early 90s, so Bill Sienkiewicz, David Keane, Ken Williams, I could go on, John J. Ruth. So all the painters really. I mean, the first time I went to a comic shop, I remember walking in and having kind of these expectations of what comics were. I was only young at the time. And you know, that's the first time I saw, I don't know, electro-assassin, I think it was, painted comics and realising that was a thing. You know, and since then, that's kind of what I wanted to do. But you know, outside of comics as well, like Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele, people like that. You know, kind of abstract stuff mixed with decorative things, but also like advertising artists from the 40s and 50s and onwards. You know, Rockwell, Kobe Whitmore, people like that. So trying to blend all that together into something really, yeah.
Well, my influences are I'm like a sponge, I'm absorbed kind of comic I love from European tradition, American, Japanese, so I tend to think specifically in every project which influences could be more useful to focus how I want to tell the story and what kind of graphic approximate I want. So in the case of World 3, we started a couple of minutes talking about influence and so not only graphically, also movies, books, a lot of stuff. I've been like all the summer before starting to draw, seeing movies, reading books. Specifically, I want to make some kind of disintoxication process for the superhero books, and I've been rereading stuff from Chris Ware, like Kitty Corrigan, I always forget the name of someone. Stuff like Yuki Ito or Tosumu Mihei or from the back home, Chuck Rollins, a lot of stuff, but always away from superheroes because I want to clean my head from this kind of, you know, the superheroes have a very servitudes of the genre and used to always make the panels to go to the reader. This kind of spectacular approachment, and I want something more cold, more cerebral, specifically with some of the characters of the book. And I was trying to make something different and to find a language unique for that book.
And one of the things that you two guys have in common as well as artists, in my eyes, is that your actors are all very diverse. So you don't see, like, there's not a Martin face or a Fernando face that you just recycle over and over and over. They're like, all the players, all the characters all have distinct looks, which is something that is, I feel like, undervalued and underappreciated when it comes to art, especially when the stories are outside of the realm of superheroes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I especially focused in the book is to make. I have a great number of characters on the book, so I try to make him everyone different, and not only the graphic, also the acting of the characters, the way they move, the way they talk. I try to make it very different one for another because all of them have their own voice.
Yeah, and in terms of influences for me, I'm similar in that you see all the different types of stories that I like to tell. So I think you can imagine that I like reading like all sorts of stories. And I think you can sort of, each title, I think I can point to the like central influences on it. And I mean, like, I think these two, it's funny, like, I think Department of Truth is almost me distilling my love of, 90s Vertigo comics. I think Nice House is kind of me distilling my love of 2000s era Vertigo comics. And I think World Tree is me distilling my love of 2000s era Wildstorm comics. And it's just like me kind of like tapping into that vein of love, and then using the aesthetic pieces of that to try to, tell the story that I'm trying to tell.
Hi, so I was introduced to your writing, James, first with DC, your runs in DC Tech and in Batman and in Eternal as well. And one of my favorite things is your character work. With such a wide variety of casts in those runs, like so many different people you're having to juggle, and it doesn't feel like anyone's a background character. My personal favorite character is Cassandra Cain, so thank you for doing a good job with that character. But my question is, especially with your original work, how do you go about with your character work? Like, how do you start? Are you pulling from literature for characters because they're just so rich, or is it people people from your own life, or is it really starting from scratch to build up such a rich, diverse cast with really depth of background in them?
I appreciate that. That's a great question. And I will say, I don't know that I believe in the concept of starting from scratch. Like, I don't think that that's something that creatively exists. So a lot of it comes from me breaking down pieces of myself and my own personality and my own experiences. It's also me folding in a lot of like people in my life, and it's not necessarily the people I am, it's not that like one character is necessarily based on one person, but it's me folding in aspects of humans I've known and loved in my life. Nice House is a standout in that category because there are more one-to-ones in that whole cast, and then on top of that, like the character of Walter in Nice House is just fully based on me. Like, just not that there's no one else folded into that character. That is, my close friends joke. It's just like if I ever invite them out to a lake house, yeah. And I mean, I think I'm always trying to hit a nerve, and the nerves that I know best are my nerves. So I'm trying to hit nerves in myself. And there are other things that I do a lot to, try to capture character. And, one trick that I've been playing with a lot over the last 2 years in particular is reading a lot of stage plays and just reading the scripts of them and just like chewing over the dialogue, especially because that's a medium where it's just like dialogue is everything. And comics, like, and then also going back to like key comic runs where it's just like with really, really beautiful dialogue. But a lot of times, the conversations characters are having are like like it's just basically different corners of my brain having arguments with each other, and for all of your amusement.
To kind of piggyback on that, there's the kind of writing cliche about how the characters will guide you through the story. Like, you just write to them and they'll navigate. Has there ever been a character that became a little bit of a square peg in a round hole for you, where you thought that they should behave a certain way and you realize, like, this character has changed quite a bit and my rein on them is more slippery than I expected it to be?
Like that, I've never found myself I found myself surprised, and then, but when I'm surprised, I lean in. I lean into suddenly what I see is working. Because the thing that absolutely happens is there'll be a character who, in the outline form, I thought would be very different than how they end up acting on the page, and once I start writing them and I write dialogue scenes for them, like sometimes there's the character you think is going to be the most fun character to write, but then when you write them, they're kind of boring. And then there's a character that you thought was kind of boring, they're really, really fun to write. And then at a certain point, you just lean in. You just like, you write more scenes with a character that's more fun to write, and increase the size of that character. And the impact they have on the story. I think the best example of that is with Something is Killing the Children, which, you know, I've talked about this before. That is the best example of me. Like the first 3 issues of that book, I was writing without a roadmap. I had no idea like the size or scope of the series. And remarkable, it feels very like even to me going back and reading that, it doesn't read that way, but it feels like it entirely was, because a lot of it was just me leaning away from every single instinct that had been beaten into me by writing DC superhero comics. Erica Slaughter isn't fully named until issue 3. Like, you know, and you don't even know if that's her real name, like when you finally hear it. There are just so many little things that I would just lean into, and then some of them I was just like, I would ultimately realize, no, there was a reason DC kept giving me that note, and I should lean into that note, and there are other reasons where it's like, no, I found my own way to write this. But the series, like more so than anything I've worked on in my career, kind of wrote itself, and told me where it wanted to go, and Erica told me where she wanted to go. Because originally the core concept of that series was going to be a 5-issue miniseries. Every issue was going to be a standalone issue, and it was going to be a kind of mini-series that was based on the kind of middle issues of like 90s Vertigo comics, where it would be something where you focus on this small town, and then this mysterious character would come through this small town, and you would see them interact, like you would see the regular people interact with this extraordinary character without ever fully knowing her story or who she is or what she means, and like what she represents and all of that. And I wanted to play with that mystery. But the second I started writing her, I was just like, no, she's the center of the whole thing. Everything is built around her. And then once I started building the world around her, which like I didn't come up with the mask. Werther came up with the mask. And once the mask existed, then it's just like, what does that mask mean? And then once it's just like, what does that mask mean? What do other masks in the same order mean? And it was just like, there was one panel description in issue 4 where I just threw out there, it was just like, we see a table, and everyone at the table's wearing a different colored mask, and they have a different stuffed animal in front of them. And it's just like, and that was the only description. And then there was a description of like this old man at the end with like this ornate golden mask. I didn't know what any of that meant. I didn't come up with the idea of what House of Slaughter was until the next issue. And it was just like, but that, everything that Something is Killing Children is based on just leaning in that moment to what felt cool and interesting. And then it's just rolling with what works. And then you build structure. And then it's like, I don't know, I think some of that's the joy of like making comics.
Awesome. So I was just wondering, specifically with regards to Department of Truth, I learned a lot about conspiracy theories that I hadn't, like ones I had never heard before. The Denver airport one was specifically pretty fun to dive into and learn more about that one. But are there any that you kind of looking back wish or thought of that you hadn't put in or that you are planning to put in, kind of that you?
Yeah, I mean the biggest one that the biggest one that originally I was gonna tie more directly into the central line, but then I, like, for I think what are obvious reasons, decided not to. Is there was a brief moment where, like, especially before the last election, and then basically I was thinking playing with QAnon a bit more, because for a while it kind of rose up and then it kind of fizzled out a little bit. But then it rose back up. And then it's just like, I don't, like, that is too real and too active in the world, and making a statement on it, like, other than, like, it's bad. It's just culturally, I didn't want to play with something like that kind of live fire. And it's one of those things where there are other things in it that we play with that are like live fire. But through the fictional lens of the series, it feels safer to touch upon, because it's, you know, the core conceit is that it's just the more that people believe in these things, that can manifest them in reality. It's not saying that this is how the world is. Like, that is not supposed to be the takeaway of anything in Department of Truth. It's about the lore that we build to try to make sense of the world, and then how the world changes the more we believe in the lore. And so I find the fascinating stories that we tell each other very fascinating. But it's just like, there are definitely things, like I'm always considering what's the responsibility of the story we're telling, because I do want to explore this, because I do find it interesting. I've always found it interesting, and I don't think that the dangerous, like the serrated edge of some of those ideas should mean that we shouldn't touch them at all, because frankly, I think one of the best ways to get people out of conspiracy thinking is if you point out that once every 30 years the same idea just comes back. Like, and it's just like you recycle these same ideas at the same cultural moments where the same cultural tensions are at play, because humans are like, we're still the same animals we were like 100 years ago, 50 years ago, like 500 years ago. We like get paranoid about the same stuff. We make up the same, like, you know, we do fall into the same patterns of scapegoating and all of this stuff. And the more you see those patterns, the more you see that it's just like, oh, actually, like, you know, it's probably unlikely that a conspiracy theory that's just popped up like in wildly different circumstances, like that regularly, is like the truth. It is more likely that it is, you know, it's a story we tell when we're scared in a certain way, because it gives a certain sense of like sense and structure to the world. So it's just like, I'm always thinking about the responsibility of all that, while also wanting to lean into, for lack of a better word, the fun of the lore around these, you know, wild things that people do.
So this question sort of piggybacks off of stuff that has been said. So we see like the most popular motif in most of these books is the power of belief.
Yeah.
And we see it, and it's used in different contexts, and it's great in Department of Truth because it acts as a great comment on the political climate, and then it goes into religion with the creation of the devil, all that stuff. It's great. But so I want to know what's behind that fascination.
That's a really good question. I mean, a lot of it comes down to the series that made me want to write comic books is Sandman. Like, and Sandman is about like the nature of storytelling and the nature of belief. And there are facets. There's facets of Sandman in everything that I write. Like, even the most like fucked up like stories that I'm writing are built out of like, you know, that my favorite issue of Sandman is the Collectors. It's issue 14, part of the Doll's House. It's the you know, it's the story of the serial killer convention, and it's just a terrifying issue, and just one of my all-time favorite comics and one of the most important comics. That's why my whole like Nightmare Country Sandman run is basically a sequel to that one issue. So it's just like everything that I'm trying to do is trying to tap into the ways in which, like, that's the series that made me want to write comics, and it made me think about comics. And it's also the other thing is just, I spend a lot of time, like, thinking about what I do, and then also thinking about why people believe the things that they believe. And I think that that's one of the core questions of our time. I'm sorry this panel's not as exciting as that's a great question. And honestly, yeah, it's like the answer to all questions like that is just like this is stuff I think about, like when I'm up late at night and just staring off into the middle distance, and slowly but surely that becomes one comic book after another.
Urban legends and conspiracy theories are like brother and sister. I mean, they're completely related. So something like World Tree, where it's this idea of like, oh, there's this website. If you look at the website, it'll make you go crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like there's stuff in the world, and that doesn't sound dissimilar to a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So I want to ask the artist real quick, and this is a judgment-free zone. Are there any conspiracy theories or urban legends that give you pause, that you might maybe you can maybe you just straight up believe in them, or maybe they just they make you think about them a little bit more than you want to.
UFO ufology stuff is kind of like completely feasible. I mean, I know it's exclusive mind, but you know, I think there's every possibility. There must be other planets that they exist. I don't know, but I mean, it's perfectly plausible. So, well, I'd like to think Bigfoot is real, but probably isn't. Well, no, that's true. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like I don't know what conspiracy theories are going to be in each issue before Genesis is true. But I still can't believe the Denver one with Lucifer, the blue horse.
Oh, yeah.
I still can completely disbelieve about that. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's really
That was
strange.
just that.
Yeah. No, there's something weird going on at that Denver airport.
Yeah, I think
I know that I'm very much a conspiracy guy because I think the conspiracies are very comforting to stay as we are, to do nothing. Because in reality, the conspiracy is about there's someone controlling the world and we can do anything about it. But the reality is that there are people controlling the world and very known like the AIDS, central banks, undernet, it doesn't exist, but we see the dark web. So there's no need of conspiracy. We are controlling. But because we know we are controlling, we can do something about it, and we don't know it because it's comforting to think there are other secret organizations controlling everything.
Yeah.
How about you? Do you have a pet conspiracy theory?
I mean, I think I'm going to piggyback on both of those answers in that I do think that there's a lot of, through UFO stories and then also just stories of encounters with the unknown. There's always, humankind has been bumping up against question mark for a long time. And I don't know that anyone has the answer to what question mark, what is in the blank. Because clearly we just interpret what the thing in the blank is based on where we are culturally and all of that. But it's just it doesn't stop from the fact that people keep bumping up against something that they can't explain. And also I think it would be hubris to think that, our weird little meat brains are capable of perceiving everything in the universe. So yeah, I think I definitely think there's more to it. I don't think that anyone has the answers, and that's what kind of connects to the next step. Anyone who says this is what is absolutely the case, I never buy that. And I also, once you've worked even just corporate systems and all of that, you see that the bigger an organization is, the more power it is, less efficient it is, and it's just nobody knows how to people don't we can barely do very basic stuff that we should frankly be able to do just as a society. So it's just I don't buy into a lot of the there's somebody there's a real agenda that's efficiently doing all of this, because it's just no, there isn't. There may have been brief moments of 20 years at various points in history where there was an efficient system, but it's just every time you build a system, it starts corroding immediately, and it's it's the first generation of the system does it well, the second generation of the system kind of improves a bit, and then the third generation of the system doesn't even understand why it was built anymore, and then you start forgetting why things were built, and then you start just trying to preserve a system rather than everything degrades, and the center does not hold. And I think entropy is the one central truth of things. So I don't know, that's a bleaker answer than that. But that's
somehow a more reassuring answer.
yeah, no, I find that reassuring. I find the kind of chaos of humanity very reassuring. It's and not all at the same time, but it's just the one thing that we can count on is humans are going to be real weird about stuff.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I've got another question kind of for Fernando and for Martin.
I'm thinking of the use of the eyes, particularly Fernando in the character we're supposed to only know through 2 issues as fear.
Yeah.
And Martin, with your different painted style, even though all the details may not be there specifically in the eyes, the feeling of fear is on the page, whether it's one of the Wild Fictions or the dude with the upside down USA hat or the Starface man. I just wonder to depict pure psychopathy. How do you address the eyes?
Well, probably the simplicity in a novel was just speeds to get things done quicker. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the fictional woman with the X's. I mean, that was sort of listed in the script when we first started doing that. But I kind of like that idea of them not even being just basically voids, moving into dash, jigsaw pieces come out, but the eyes are looking into them. But yeah, with most of them, it's kind of it's just about how my style was developed, really, to be honest with you. But,
Well, I think there's a very basic language of the site. It's very small tweaks. You want to make something. The look is a little bit crazy. You made that as if he had the open the eyes. So things like that, or not looking at the camera sometimes could be useful. It's very simple tricks. When you learn those tricks around all your career, then it's easy to use it. There's no big secret about it.
Yeah.
I mean, what we use quite a lot in the bottom feed is the reflections in the eyes as well. And that's just the storytelling technique, really, but it's kind of effective one you can use, whether it's in glasses or people's pupils in the eyes, it's always a good technique to use. Yeah, there's no deep, meaningful reason behind the eyes.
The simple glasses is water.
Yeah.
The glasses, you don't see the eyes, and that gives some special personality to the character.
Right.
I think so. It's like a fictional woman. We don't really know anything about that character.
Yeah.
In the book, it's like the way of not looking into
Yeah.
is just to have these weird voids on the faces of the eyes. It's kind of it's just mysterious.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I'm going to take one more question to close us out. Does anybody have another question for these gentlemen? Okay.
I'll say first, I've read every bit of Sandman. It's the greatest comic book I've read. And I've read, I think, everything of yours that's not superhero, from a medic all the way up to everything right now. I feel like Nice House is your Sandman. That's just my personal opinion. I think it's beyond a masterpiece. It's incredible. So, 2 questions, I guess. The first one I know I'm not going to answer for. Is there any way we can get any hint on the World Tree Net password?
Keep reading it. We're gonna start opening that up, and it's just we're having some fun there. This is it's going to be a way we're going to sort of share some fun extra content as the series moves on. But you're also going to see that become a central part of the series itself. So we're I'm trying to lean into both. What's fun, what I find fun about, if you remember in the early mid-2000s, all of the ARG style websites and stuff that would pop up around, the Donnie Darko movie website was one of my favorites and all that stuff, and it's a lot harder now without Flash to do some of those tricks, but it's, I love that stuff, and so we're gonna have some fun. So I think so. Stay tuned. But everything you will need to get further into it will happen with the issues themselves. So stay tuned. And it's not going to be here's a big secret. It's going to be kind of obvious how to guide your way in. But first we showed you the way in. Next we'll show you how to get in, and then we'll see where we go from there. Issue to issue.
The main question I had was to involve everyone. Has there been anything that these two have ever done that changed what you were writing? So something you got back in the art redefined or made you rethink what you were writing, and you redefined a character or a direction of story just based on the conceptual art you got?
Absolutely. Like that happens all the time. And I mean, like that goes all the way back to what I was saying about, something's killing children. The way that when Further designed the mask, it changed the trajectory of the book. It changed what the book was and how I saw the book and how I wanted to write the book. But there are moments like that that have happened in each of these series. The personality that I had in mind for Ellison, the character in World Tree, used to be like kind of different, but then you keep leaning into how he's kind of like boring and a bit of a dope, and I love that. And it's made him more fun to write because he's falling into this like deeply around all these like highly cerebral characters, including like his like nebulous non-girlfriend character Fausta, like who it's just like he's spent his life surrounded by people smarter than him, and his story is going to be more interesting in the fact that he's not as smart as all the people surrounding him. And like even in the art there, like the tattoo design.
I understand that there is a boring person in the character, and so I try to put it in some random tattoos without personality, because it's the kind of
He wanted a tattoo, but he didn't have a meaning behind why he wanted a tattoo. He just wanted a tattoo.
So I did a random tribal tattoo and barcoded in the art. It's something that
He wouldn't be able to explain why he got either. Yeah. And then I think
in Department of Truth, I knew the Scarface Man was going to be like a central concept in the series, but the first time that Martin drew the Scarface Man, and it was just like, oh man, this is going to be a much bigger part of the book. This is like, it's just too cool of an image to like not lean into. And it's just like once you're gifted that, like it's just like you just lean in. And I love, like when something works, I always like to lean in.
I mean that character is quite organic to and fro, wasn't it, to the process. And a lot of the way the character looks was born out of trying to find a different technique to show that character on the page. So that one's we created models for the hair, and we photographed it and basically collaged it into so it looks kind of off kilter with the other characters, and it looks kind of jarring and strange. And it just developed from there, didn't it, really? It's just interesting.
I got the first page appearance of them because I couldn't let anybody else have it.
And are you guys here tomorrow as well?
Yeah, we are.
So everybody, let's give it up. This was a great conversation. You guys have a slew of different projects that you've worked on at your tables, and they'll be signing the rest of the evening and tomorrow as well. Thank you so much for coming out to Dallas again, and we really appreciate this. This has been one of my favorite conversations I think we've had. It's really, really nice. Thank you so much, guys.